Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Before I get started, I just want to say a huge thank you to Olivia and Rebecca. I appreciate you guys coordinating and helping me plan and pull everything together. You saying cultural credit takes me back about 11 years when I carefully monitored exactly how many credits I had so I could make sure I graduated. So my journey as a Hatter actually started a really long time ago. Both of my parents, who are on the chat today, were Hatters, and one of their dear friends, who's become one of my favorite people, John Shelton, is on as well. So my journey started in the 70s, and then I went to Stetson, graduated in 2009. I had a double major in Spanish and education, and then went to Vanderbilt right after to get my master's in education, specifically in English language learners. It was pretty much then that I started practicing change management because my life went in a completely different direction and I had to roll with it. So I accepted a role in the retail industry instead of going into teaching, which is what I'd planned to do the entire time. And eventually that led me into consulting. So I work for a company now called Interface, which is a world leading company for commercial flooring. But we also have a really large sustainability mission, and we're one of the industry leaders along with some of the other big companies in the world, like Patagonia, for example. I live in Atlanta now with my husband and my son and my dog. And in my spare time, I love to ride my Peloton. I love to hang out with my friends and family. That's been a little hard lately, but that's change. So that's enough about me. I am actually going to turn my camera off to protect my bandwidth. Everyone knows working from home, you just never know about those internets. All right, so 3 main things that I'm hoping to cover with you today. I could talk about change management as long as you let me, but I want to give you a high-level overview of what change management is and why it's important. Basically, who it impacts, how it happens, and what do you need to know to even start to understand the concept of what change management is. Then we'll get into ways that you can lead as a change manager. So I know that we have a mixed audience today, and regardless of your role, whether you're a student, a professional, a family member, you are a change manager in your own life. And we'll talk about some ways that you can apply these concepts, even in a virtual setting, as we start to shift towards virtual school and then also telecommuting as professionals. We'll, of course, save time at the end for some questions and answers, and then I'll share some additional resources for you to learn more. One of my favorite quotes is that the only constant in life is change. And this is something that we use a lot in the change management industry because change happens. You can't stop it from happening. It's hard, it's overwhelming, and especially right now, the world is changing every day, and sometimes it feels like it's even changing by the hour. So even though you can't impact that, you can proactively prepare for the change to help ease that transition period and try and make it as seamless as possible. So let's get started with the overview. Change management is defined by ProSci, which is what I consider to be the governing body of the change management practice, as the processes, tools, and techniques to manage the people side of change. More simply put, it's managing people from the current state of how we do things today to the future state of how we do things tomorrow. People are the biggest and most important aspect of successful change and transformation initiatives. They're also the most expensive resource too. So years ago, change management really wasn't even on people's radars. It used to be all about project management. And now that change is slowly focusing onto change management as people realize that project management and change management are inextricably intertwined. You really can't have one without the other. You need someone to consider the processes and the technologies while someone else focuses on the people. What happened also is that organizations started to realize that people are the ones driving the business results, which is why they're the biggest, most important, and most expensive aspect of successful transformation. Practicing change management increases your probability of success and helps to mitigate any risk associated with it. So I want you to imagine that you've signed a $2 million contract with a huge company like Workday or Salesforce, and you're shifting your company from paper processes to electronic processes, and all of a sudden people aren't using the system. It's a waste of $2 million just for people to keep operating in the current state and not adopt or adhere to the change with the future state. It's risky. Change management also helps develop what we call a change competency or a change muscle. It would be like if I asked you to drop down and give me 100 push-ups right now without stopping. Chances are that would be pretty hard for anybody to accomplish. If you can, more power to you. But if you train, if you practice, and you strengthen those muscles, all of a sudden that Herculean effort seems a lot more manageable. So that's that change competency. The more you practice it, the more that you adhere to these principles within your organization or your school or even your family, you'll be ready, responsive to change, and adaptive to that transformation. Change happens slowly, it's hard, and it's a process. And there are specific elements that build on each other to support people through that transition to make change successful. You'll often hear people say that we can do the change with you, for you, or to you. Nobody likes to have it done to them. Nobody likes to have it done for them. Everybody wants you to work on change with them. So your goal as a change manager is to manage change at an individual level to support everybody holistically from the current state to the future state. So there are 5 elements of change. And again, this is based off of ProSci's change management methodology, which they call the ADKAR model. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Each element in the ADKAR process is critical, and you have to accomplish one before you move on to the next. They build on each other. So the first block is awareness. That's what starts the change process. People need to know what's going on. They need to know what's up, and they need to know why they're changing. It's also important to juxtapose that against the question of what happens if we don't change. What is the risk to us? Helping people understand that then allows you to start to build desire for the change. This is a really tricky one. This is where a lot of people get stuck because participating in a change and creating that desire is a personal choice. And people want to know what's in it for them, how this change benefits them. Because of this, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is what I've seen a lot of clients or a lot of organizations misstep with, because you only start to talk about one value proposition or one rationale or one case for change. And people are capturing the benefits from leadership's perspective or their sponsor's perspective, but not about the individual's perspective who's actually leading and implementing the change at the ground level. So desire is really that what's in it for me, or you'll hear people sometimes call it the WIFM. Once you've developed that awareness and desire, you move on to knowledge. People are opted in, they're bought into the concept, but they need to know how to change and what to do differently. This is really where training comes in. So it can either be in person, that can be online. It can also be through stakeholder engagement and strategic communications. So it doesn't always have to look like sitting in a classroom learning a new system or learning a new process. You can certainly get more creative. I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. Ability is the demonstration or the application of that knowledge. Can I take what I learned and apply it to my day job or my normal ways of working to demonstrate that I'm able to change? And finally, reinforcement is what makes it stick. That's often coming from leadership, people holding you accountable and making sure that people don't slide back into the way things were done before. With each of these elements, it's inevitable that you run into a barrier point. That barrier point has to be addressed because it prevents you from moving on in the change process. And this change process ebbs and flows. So you may see somebody get to knowledge and then slip back to desire because they don't understand the benefit completely. So you have to go back, address that before you can go forward. Although there are very specific elements to change, you're not necessarily focusing on each element as much as the application of it. So we look at things like stakeholder interviews, we look at communications, we look at training, we look at quick reference guides, even Twitter and some more creative communication vehicles to help apply these concepts in a more practical, lifelike manner. So I have a few of these slides peppered throughout the presentation, but I really want to hear from everybody on the call. I want you to think outside the box. Think outside of those 5 boxes, those elements of change, and tell me about a time where you experienced change or you helped manage it. This can be either personally or professionally, or if you help someone do the same. As you're starting to think about it, it can be anything from I needed to take 10,000 steps a day, that was my goal, or I wanted to work out 4 times a week, or I needed to help someone understand why they needed to spend less time on their computer or their phone. So I'm going to take a minute here and ask that you share your experience in the chat box. Hey, Tyler, long time. So Tyler said getting team members to use webcams. That is a huge shift, especially right now when you're working from home. Nobody wants to get up, feel pulled together. It's much easier just to stay in your jammies or your workout wear. That's a hard one. It's something that we're working on at Interface too. It's also kind of awkward if you're the only one with your camera on. Beginning to strength train in order to lead a healthier life. Also a very ambitious goal, especially right now. You may have a little extra time on your hands. So I love both of these examples. We have one that's a little bit more personal and individual. We have one that's a direct benefit to a team or an organization. I'll give you about another 30 seconds if anybody else wants to share. Keeping and adjusting work routines while working from home. That's a really good one. Interestingly enough, Rebecca, there's a lot of articles out there right now about how keeping and adhering to a routine helps you maintain boundaries so that work and life don't bleed into each other and you feel like you're on the clock all the time, and what that does to alleviate some of the mental health concerns that people are experiencing during a pandemic. Balancing work and family life. Thank you, Mom. I agree. Sky wrote a good one. For my interpersonal communications class, we originally planned to do a group project toward the end of the semester. This was before we knew we had to go online for the second half of the semester. Many people ended up deciding to work alone, but a friend and I worked together. We set up meetings and established a PowerPoint, and we were able to successfully turn it in and present our topic despite the challenges. Sky, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I'm also assuming you're either still a student or a graduate, so I want to let you know I'm thinking about you. I know it's really tough right now. There's so many different components to an education, let alone the scholastic part. So I'm with you. I hope that you're doing okay. Great example, transitioning from, oh good, current student, incoming sophomore. Way to go. Resilient to change. Yeah, working online and remotely is a huge shift. It's a huge change in both culture and ways of working. But as we talk about kind of the different elements of change in the change process here, you'll start to see how what you did and some of the desire that you got from your friends and that buy-in helped you to be so successful. So let's take a closer look at this. And I'm actually going to walk you through an example of change that I led recently at Interface. And before I get going, there's a couple of things that you need to know. So one, most projects start in response to a business need. There's a problem or there's something that's popped up that the business needs to respond to and respond to quickly. The second thing you need to know is that Interface is a commercial flooring company. So that means we depend on sales and we depend on our sales force to secure orders from our customers. But as you've, I'm sure, heard, the customer is always right. And so we instill that concept of customer centricity within our sellers and help them accommodate to make sure that the sales process is as easy as possible. So Sky, kind of like you said, towards the end of the spring, we started to see everybody shifting to telecommuting. We also noticed that a lot of companies like Zoom or GoToWebinar were dramatically increasing their marketing to target companies like ours and our customers. We noticed that a lot of our customers were taking their meetings, their collaboration sessions, and their sales organizations and moving them virtually. So basically, they were leveraging other communications than what we were using, and we were using Skype for Business. So in order to participate, some of our sellers were procuring licenses for these platforms instead of just joining through the web application, which basically resulted in a lot of additional expenses when we were going into a huge cost savings mode. And eventually, some people had to pay out of pocket because these expenses weren't approved and they didn't qualify for reimbursement. We also quickly saw that platforms like Zoom are more vulnerable to cybersecurity breaches than others, which I know impacted Stetson recently too. There was a third component, which we knew that Microsoft was retiring Skype eventually in 2021. So given these three things, the business need, the cybersecurity breach, and the need to accommodate our customers, we ended up deciding to go live with Microsoft Teams and migrate our entire global organization to the Teams platform much earlier than planned to help offer our employees with a supported solution that meets their needs for engaging customers and also facilitated some of that online collaboration that I know so many of us are experiencing right now. If I was to tell these reasons to anybody else within my organization, some of our sellers, some of my peers, no one would care. This is what mattered to leadership. This is what mattered to our CFO. This is what mattered to our CIO. They want to do what works and what's easy and what's familiar. They're not interested in changing unless they have to. And remember, change is personal. Everyone has their own idea of what the future state looks like and why it's important to them. So I was recruited to do a change management project along with executing our leadership's vision to make this happen, and worked very closely with the IT team to manage the project management side, the technology side, and then also the people side. So you'll see here at the bottom that there are actual clips of what I did, and this is the text verbatim that I either distributed through verbal communication or written communication, including frequently asked questions and posts on our internal communication sites. So I started by building awareness. What's going on? Well, Microsoft is retiring Skype, so you're going to have to change eventually. Teams is also part of our standardized suite of tools, which gives you a supported solution. Basically, if you were to run out of Wi-Fi or run into a technology error on GoToMeeting or Zoom, the IT department couldn't help you. But if you use Teams, they can. By migrating platforms early, we'll help to be better prepared to work effectively and efficiently before Skype is retired. We're getting ahead of this. We're going to be leading the way and hoping to design a better way for both our sellers and our customers. Building that awareness was pretty straightforward. Everybody had started to see commercials for Teams. The software was already installed on a lot of people's computers. And so we had kind of a foundational platform on which we could build to start to create that desire. Now remember, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and this is the hardest element to overcome because we needed people to decide to buy in. We couldn't make them use Teams yet. We had to get them to want to use Teams. We had to get them to make that choice themselves. So this is where we started to brainstorm different value propositions for our stakeholder personas or groups of people to help make that change more personal, meaningful, and relevant. We conducted things like stakeholder interviews and surveys, and then we analyzed some of the data and metrics behind each platform to understand what the current benefits and limitations of Skype for Business were, and basically try and figure out why Teams was better. So we slowly started to trickle out some of these benefits. We let people know that there's no loss in functionality. You're not losing anything. In fact, you're getting all the same stuff, and then you're gaining some really cool features like an enhanced audiovisual experience. You're getting GIFs, you're getting stickers, you get better emojis, and you're able to collaborate all in one platform. So in a lot of ways, it was actually taking a step back to create more efficiency and optimize the technology tools that were already loaded onto our laptops. One big thing that we uncovered that I honestly was not expecting, a lot of our sellers use Macs because we are a design company as well. We're designing these beautiful floor plates for our customers. So what we realized is that Skype had its limitations with Mac, but Teams is compatible with PC and Mac. So this was a really big benefit to more than half of our employees. At the end of the day, everybody was changing. This change impacted any technology-enabled employee, so anyone with a laptop or anyone with an iPad. So we had to figure out different value props that meant something and resonated with different people. All right, so we built that awareness, we built the desire, and now it was time to train. So we hosted a series of trainings across a month for employees, which is a really long time for training. Usually you want training to be just in time to promote retention, but we decided because we're a global organization and we have so many different languages across our employee population that we needed to make this really accessible, and we needed to make sure that people could attend so that we had higher adoption or higher participation in the change. We hosted a series of 30, 45-minute trainings in the actual tool, and then we recorded a clean copy and made that recorded version available so that people could either take a refresher or if they weren't able to join a session, that they could access it later. During the training, we did a day in the life. So it was very much so an interactive, discussion-based walkthrough of the platform using kind of day in the life scenarios that those different persona groups or those groups of people experience on a daily basis. So I like to call them little golden nuggets of information, or information that people could break down and kind of digest in less than a minute. We also then took those same little golden nuggets and placed them on Workplace, which is our internal communications product and happens to be a Facebook company. So the platform's very user-friendly, incredibly intuitive and engaging. And people are familiar with it because, a lot of people know about Facebook. So we made it accessible, we made it user-friendly, and then we needed to see if it worked. So one thing that frustrates me about change management is that a lot of the times it gets a bad reputation from people that don't understand it. People say that the work is fluffy, or it's non-essential, or project management is more important, or people just need to get over it and get on board with the change. Well, that's not really how it works. There's a lot of soft skills needed to be successful in change management. That's absolutely true. But change can also be data and metric driven, in addition to those anecdotally based evidence or scenarios. So I worked with the IT team and I had them run 30, 60, 90-day reports comparing Teams usage to Skype before the migration. Now keep in mind, the migration is when we flip the switch, when we're like, Skype is no more, we're Teams, all in. But we wanted to see how people were using and adopting it before we made them change. The data was consistently showing a huge increase week by week. I mean, it was massive. And really, we just wanted to see Teams going up and Skype going down. We also analyzed some of the help desk tickets coming in to try and identify themes or different patterns so that we could identify if there was any remedial training or different engagement strategies that we needed to support our people in making sure that they were prepared and able to use this tool. We also leveraged change agents, or I guess what we would consider like Instagram influencers, but for business, within the organization to help spread the word, increase enthusiasm, and act as super users for questions, comments, or feedback. I'm sure everyone can hear that. My 2-year-old has decided to ring the doorbell incessantly. Fantastic. Sorry about that, had to shut the door. The joys of working from home. All right, so we knew that people had the ability. We also now had to reinforce the change. So before we officially migrated, adoption was over 90%. That's huge, especially for interface. So it was sustained by positive experience, all of that enhanced functionality that I mentioned earlier, and then also our leaders were super on board. I wouldn't say that Interface's leadership team is exactly progressive or like super cutting edge. In a lot of ways, we're still what we call lovingly a 40-year-old startup. So the fact that our leaders were getting on board and excited about this new technology was huge and created kind of a ripple effect within the organization. We also launched some of the supplemental training tools and resources to make sure that the change was sticking. And like I said, deliver that kind of just-in-time experience so that retention was still incredibly high. Ultimately, adoption was 100% because we flipped the switch and we eventually retired Skype for Business. So people didn't necessarily have an option except to use Teams. But I'm proud that we got them, 90% of the way there before we made that decision. I talked about barrier points earlier, and of course, like any change project, we did encounter a barrier point. And not surprisingly, that barrier point was desire. We had to go back and address this. The process wasn't as fluid as I just walked you through. People weren't necessarily ready to make that personal choice. There were 2 things that I heard from my stakeholder interviews. 1, Skype works fine for me. Basically, people were afraid of change, intimidated to learn how to work a new app. They didn't want to learn something else. Why? If it isn't broken, don't fix it. I also heard I'll change when I have to, which means that people just didn't want to take the time to learn a new app and figured they would make the switch when we decommissioned Skype and went full court press on Teams, which is fine too, as long as they attended the training and they felt completely prepared and knew what was expected of them and knew how to use the tool. We ended up picking them up in terms of adoption when we flipped the switch. To help mitigate some of that resistance, though, we did vary our engagement activities. I started to do more bite-sized communications and trainings, and then also realized, based on our workplace analytics, which again is a Facebook product, that the posts that had things like GIFs or pictures or videos were almost double the engagement statistics of posts that did not. So we started to post more of that. We made our tone of voice more approachable. It was more colloquial. It was more informal and more engaging in terms of conversations. We also leveraged what we call priority senders, so people that want to hear news from. So for example, we had leaders talk about why this was important to the organization. And then we had managers give more project updates kind of at a ground level to understand the day-to-day impact and implications that the project was having on an employee's life and normal ways of working. I think the best thing that we did and the most important thing that we did was continually posting the picture that you'll see here at the bottom left about if you have a question for teams or if you need additional resources or additional support, click ask to share your questions. We saw a lot of people comment here. You'll see here that there were 13 comments, which is actually a lot for our organization. But I was getting one-off emails. I was getting team chats. I was getting a lot of different questions from people that I didn't necessarily think were listening, and I reached them in a different way, which was fantastic. Ultimately, we made all of the training materials available on the same platform, and I leveraged hashtags and different topic tags and different features within the platform. So these tools and information was readily available at everybody's fingertips if they just did a quick search on the platform. So now I want you to take a step back and think about the change that you submitted in the chat. So we had getting team members to use webcams, beginning to strength train to lead a healthier lifestyle, keeping work routines, balancing work-life family, moving from in-person to virtual collaboration. I want you to take all of these and identify what was your initial barrier point, what was your hiccup that initially prevented you from successfully implementing the change, or maybe it stopped it entirely. And then share also what you did to overcome it. Mickey, I see your comment here. I missed that earlier, that you purchased a company and assured the new employees that they would not lose any of their benefits and that there was a big upside. People are okay with change as long as they don't lose anything from change. Absolutely. I'm curious to know if you experienced any barrier points. So I know integration is a hot topic. It's something I deal with every day. All right, Sky said it was difficult for us to figure out times to meet and how to do this because we had different schedules. To overcome this, my friends and I were able to agree on a time and set a goal on what to complete by the end of the day. I think that's awesome. It sounds like you needed a process. You needed that knowledge of how to make this change work, and you put a structure in place to help scaffold that transition. Tyler, creating new norms for business attire on webcams, engaging team leadership to help set expectations and model the new behavior. Yes, we've had to have a lot of conversations about business attire on webcams, but I think really what you're onto is the whole leadership engagement. You need that executive sponsorship to help reinforce that change and make it stick. If people see organizational changes and strategies happening from the top down, they're more likely to get on board, but really activating that change happens bottom up. So it sounds like you needed some reinforcement there, which is fantastic that you could leverage it. John said the best way for me to learn was to practice by using Teams with my team. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like you needed a little bit of knowledge there too. By far the motivation to continue it. This goes back to strength training. In truth, I have yet to fully overcome it, but I felt that at the end of the day, it depended on how much better things would be for me in the long run. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I know fitness is a personal journey, and that building the desire to opt in and choose to do that every day can be huge to tackle. John, I want to go back to something you said that you were practicing by using teams with your team. Something that I've seen our leadership do is not necessarily engage the level beneath them, but the direct reports of their direct reports. So people that are on that ground level really interacting, that are kind of that energy and the heart and soul of the company. They're the movers and shakers. They're what we call the influencers or the change agents. When you can leverage them to say, hey, I need your help, or I need you to teach me this, or I want to practice that, it is so helpful, not only getting them on board, but also upskilling yourself. Mickey, we didn't lose a few of the new employees over the years. Maybe we should have been more engaged with them and look at what they wanted to be in the future. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to have a thoughtful response like that. I know integration, like I said, is a hot topic. I think attrition is inevitable. Unfortunately, you lose people either through voluntary or involuntary separation, especially when there's duplicate roles within the organization. But when you help people understand kind of where they could go in that realm of possibility, you're helping to create that desire for them to overcome and be a part of the change. Miranda, I saw your comment earlier. I think that you were sharing that you were going back to work at the same time as going to school, which is basically like having 3 full-time jobs, not even 2. So the barrier point for you is feeling like I didn't have enough time to do both. I overcame this by creating a better schedule for both parts of my life in order to accomplish both. That's fantastic. It sounds like you realized that without that structure, you may not have that ability. So you gave yourself the knowledge and the structure, kind of like Sky did with her communications class. These are great examples. I'll give everyone about 5 more seconds. Speaking of teams, my boss just tagged me in something. I thought I closed that platform. Tyler said, who communicates the message is such a crucial decision point. It's not always leadership, although their messaging is often essential, but it's the person that has influence over those impacted. Yes. So ProSci says that people want to hear about changes to strategy and organizational impacts from leadership. They want kind of that 20,000-foot view, high-level overview from the people who are leading and driving the company. They want to hear about specific changes, day-to-day impacts from their manager. But Tyler, I agree with you. What you're saying is that we also need influencers. We need people who know a lot of people. They're well-connected. People listen when they speak. They're passionate. And I've found that actually the best change agents or communicators are the ones who are initially a little bit skeptical and resistant to the change, but highly influential. If you can flip them, their level of influence still changes, but now all of a sudden they're on board. So they almost become a better advocate and a better spokesperson for change because they can easily say to people, you know, hey, I didn't want to do this either. I thought this was going to be awful, but it's actually pretty cool. You should try it. It's a really powerful messaging. Great comments. Thank you so much for engaging. I was not expecting anybody to chat with me, so that's fantastic. All right, the next section, leading as a change manager. I want to talk about how we're going to apply these change concepts, both through effective communication and engagement, and then also how you can do so in a virtual setting. So change extends beyond business. It impacts us in every role in our lives. So the 3 personas that I just used, for example, today are students, professionals, and then professionals and family members. Students like Sky are transitioning from traditional school settings to distance learning. They're missing out on those non-scholastic components of education. They're missing out on the social component, the physical component, the emotional development component. Professionals are transitioning from the office to telecommuting. They're learning how to engage and collaborate differently with their customers and peers. More importantly, they're also learning how to lead teams from a distance and how to manage people remotely, which can be really tricky and a huge change, especially if you've really curated and honed your leadership style over the years. And then more importantly, we're all people. We may not have dependents, but we all have a family. And we're not only, managing individual change, but helping family through abrupt life changes, including disruptions to support systems like childcare or social networks. All of a sudden, you can't see your friends and family. This change is hard, and it impacts everybody differently, especially when your routine is thrown off. Your coping mechanisms, like maybe going to the gym, group fitness classes, going out to eat, travel, all those things are, unavailable or inaccessible. We also have people that unfortunately are losing their jobs. Change is happening all around us. So what can you do about it? How can you help people through this change? Adhering to some of these guiding principles can be effective regardless of the situation. The first, and I think personally the biggest and most important element, is to practice empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Remember, every person's perspective is their reality. So even if you don't see the situation that way, you have to be sensitive to the fact that they do. They're living it. That's their reality. And you have to help them through it by meeting people where they are. Everyone's making difficult decisions. They may not be choices that you have to make, but they're still difficult, and they're experiencing those different barrier points like so many of you shared in the chat. By meeting people where they are, you're practicing empathy, and you're remembering that this is their personal choice. Your job is just to support them. You can use neutral statements even if you disagree or there's a polarizing topic that comes up. Everybody's talking about COVID-19. Everybody's caught in kind of the rut of the pandemic. It's hard. And so there are these really difficult conversations, and at times you need to de-escalate the situation. So for example, I'm a mom. I actually just pulled my son out of his daycare facility. We call it at school because they do such a fantastic job with the curriculum. We have friends that are sending their kids back. We have some friends that also withdrew their kids. We have some friends that aren't sure, and so they're deferring month by month. It's a hot topic, and instead of just saying like, well, that's not what I'm going to do, or I don't think that's the right decision, you can make neutral comments and say things like, I know that was a really tough decision. I think that what you're doing sounds like it's the right thing for your family. Let me know if you want to talk about it. In business, if people aren't comfortable jumping on webcam, you can say things like, I know this is hard. Like, it's hard for me to keep my routine. I don't necessarily want to get up every day too. I get that. It's tough. You can also communicate actively and transparently. So the studies show that people need to hear something 5 to 7 times before it sticks, which may feel like you're repeating yourself, but you're not. You can vary your communication style, your method, and then also your sender, kind of like Tyler said in the chat earlier, by switching the voices that they're hearing and utilizing all the communication vehicles available to you. It can be something as simple as we talked about earlier with adding a GIF to a post. You can leverage text message. You can leverage TikTok. I don't know, all the different vehicles that are available to you. You can get creative. It's just really important that you remember to vary it, keep repeating your message, repeat it from their perspective and what their proposition is, and then be honest. There's no need to try and cover anything up. In fact, I think it's more impactful and more powerful if you address challenges or shortcomings and then can speak to it from there. Happy hours as well through different technology platforms. But I think really what's important here is that you're communicating early, you're communicating often, and that you're asking for people's feedback. How are you goes a long way. What's going on in your life? How's your daughter doing? I know that your son had COVID. Like, how's he feeling? Is he over it? Think about these different personal things going on in people's lives. Ask them about them. Show that you're open, show that you're transparent, be them for them. Most importantly, stay present, demonstrate active listening, try to manage all of your digital distractions. We live in this world where you have constant access to real-time information. I mean, I'm just looking around my office right now. I have my laptop, I have my Apple Watch, I have my iPhone, I have a second monitor, I have a Bluetooth speaker device. Like, there's things all around you. And so it can be really hard when you're on a Teams call to not check your text messages or online shop or read CNN or pop onto Twitter. But you wouldn't do those things if the person was right in front of you. So taking those distractions out of the way really helps you stay present and facilitate that open communication and dialogue. All right, so now we're going to go back to the chat box. I want to hear from you again. Not necessarily about the example that we talked about previously, but something else that's going on. Tell me how you're leading as a change manager. What are you doing to support people either in your personal life or your organization, your university, to help them through changes at the moment. Things that you can share include different strategies, values, kind of like we talked about empathy. If you think about sensitivity or humor, different tools that you're leveraging. So I know there's an app called House Party that people are using to play games with their friends or their family. I'm interested in hearing what you're doing. All right, I'm going to throw this to my dad because I know that he's on the line. Oh, thank you, Mom. Communicate with friends and family and asking how they are. Yes. All right, now, Dad, if you're seeing any trends at CBRE, you've seen some of your coworkers using some more innovative solutions, drop it in the chat because you're also a part of a global business, so you have a really unique perspective. Sky, it would be great to hear how you're helping your friends kind of transition based on what's going on at Stetson next year. All right, Samantha says making time to check in on friends and family. Yeah. Francis, creating a group chat with friends and family and FaceTiming them once a week. Yeah, so obviously there's a theme going on here. And you know what happened to me today, I was chatting with one of my really close girlfriends on the internet. I was actually using Teams, and then I decided I have extra time. I'm running an errand. I was popping over to my parents' house to pick up a car seat. I'm just going to call her and see if she's available. And at the end of the conversation, she said to me, I really need to make time to pick up the phone and call people. And I saw this also on my birthday. People went out of their way to make sure that I felt special. And it was the first year that I heard from every single person who I care about dearly, because all of a sudden people are making this effort to connect and check in on friends and family. So it's almost like there are some benefits coming out of this here. Sending short video responses to email and Teams communications to create a more personal message. I love that. Yeah, how impactful that people hear you. I mean, right there, you're getting visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learners to help kind of relay your message and create that open communication. It's also really, I think it's humbling if your manager or your leader is throwing out a video message. How cool. All right, Sky says she's been setting schedules and prioritizing, which is important. Reaching out to friends and family to give them advice about college, comforting them when they need a friend, ensuring that you're always there, helping new hatters feel welcome by reaching out to them by phone or social media. That's huge. Look at you, change manager. Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I can't even imagine being a new hatter. I think about my first semester at Stetson and just how excited I was to be there, and I wanted to participate in everything. And given the climate that's going on right now, that may look different this year. And so I'm really sensitive, like I said earlier, to the fact that not everybody's going to have that experience. And by lending kind of that empathetic ear and hand and saying hey, I'm here for you, let's talk about it, that's fantastic. Being open and honest with your group that things are fluid and are going to change. Yes. The only constant is change. Mickey, videos every Friday called Fridays with Mickey. I love that. It's an uplifting type of video, and I interview current employees so that our other team members can get to know them better. I also discuss our fundamental of the week. This week's fundamental is show meaningful appreciation. That's fantastic. It sounds like you're really living some values there and leading by example. At Interface, I launched a new series called Welcome to Basecamp, which is our global headquarters. And I filmed some of I didn't film them. They filmed themselves on Teams. But I had some of our more influential employees or people that you see typically floating around the office a lot in different business functions to help record a message to welcome future base campers and employees and share what they love about the building. Because like Alex said, things are going to change. And then like Sky said, you want them to know that you're there for them. So creating kind of that video message and that personal touch point about living values is critical. Reached out to graduating seniors in my high school to congratulate them on their resilience in getting through everything. Sky, it sounds like you have a career in change management. Call me. All right, I think my dad said reoccupation strategy, affirming and delivering a safe and healthy workplace, changing related guidance daily, and assuring that all stakeholders are engaged, heard, and valued. Yeah, a lot of the time you just have to provide that feedback mechanism, that feedback loop to let people have a voice. 9 times out of 10, they just want their concerns heard. They might not even be like really valid concerns. They just want to express them and get them off their chest, even if you already have a plan to kind of address or mitigate them. Something also that my dad said here, delivering a safe and healthy workplace. There's 2 concepts to that are going on right now. There's mental health and physical health. And so you want to, what we're calling designing for distance, where you're helping people not only develop a sense of psychological safety, but physical safety by putting things like distancing and floor plates and patterns in place, making sure you have touchless fixtures, appropriate furniture, wipes, masks, things like that, but also that you're spaced enough in creating these new ways of working and behavioral changes to support any physical changes that are being put in place. And that, I'm finding, is really where the change management comes in. It's changing our behavior to change the actual changes in physical structures in place. Miranda, I'm leading as a change manager by communicating with my friends and family through all the outlets that technology has offered us. That's such a good point. I mean, what a time, right? If we have to go through this, there's so many resources available to us. All we have to do is just think about it and get a little creative. Absolutely, optimize everything that's at your fingertips. I've also found that it's doing things like this, but also, in person or on the phone where the participants aren't muted and you can get feedback, is really important, because it's just asking like, hey, what are you seeing? What are you finding that's worked? Have you done anything really interesting lately to connect with somebody else? Just throwing yourself out there and asking the question can really make a big difference. Fantastic responses. I'm going to open it up for Q&A, but I just want to let you know that on the next slide here, I've listed 3 resources: ProSci, ACMP, and then also MSI. Again, I think ProSci is the leading body. That's actually who I'm certified through. But what distinguishes them is they have research to back up the change management practice. They offer training both online and in person, and they offer certifications and consulting. So I know that we have some professionals on the call. If you feel like you need some help but don't know where to get started from a change perspective, absolutely reach out to them. If you do decide to pursue a career in change management, look up the ACMP. It's kind of the global community that connects everybody together. It's like your own social network for change management professionals. And then MSI is a professional development course to help you learn how to implement change in a business environment. So that's everything that I have. I would love to hear more from you. We've had a really engaging group here. What questions do you have about change, things going on in your life or your business that you're wondering how change management could help solution them? Any feedback about the presentation? This is your chance. Would love to hear from you.
Guys, thank you so much. I swear you should have your own podcast. The more I was listening, I'm like, this is all awesome. You should have a podcast. But yeah, keep your questions coming. Comments in the chat box. We've got some time to answer whatever.
All right, I have a question from my mom or my dad. I think it's my dad because there's no emoji or punctuation. How has leadership engaged the requisite level of change? So if I'm understanding your question correctly, and go ahead and type it if I'm not, how is leadership embracing the changes that we're putting in place? What's interesting is that, like I said, Interface is a 40-year-old startup. And so in a lot of ways, we're really conservative compared to the people that we compare ourselves with from a sustainability perspective, because again, that is the mission and purpose of our company. So what I'm seeing is that we're going from an employer-focused, where leadership is driving everything, to an employee-focused company. And a lot of that is actually being driven by my boss, who I adore, and is the Chief Human Resources Officer, where we're looking at this opportunity is, okay, we've had to, go through some really tough times. We've had to make some tough business decisions. How are we retaining our talent? Not necessarily how are we recruiting, but how are we supporting these really key players and top tier talent individuals that we have within the organization? So they're really embracing it. It's a huge cultural shift for us, especially because we had what we lovingly call a butts and seats approach to the office, where we wanted to see people in the office. We wanted people to come in every day. And now all of a sudden we're telecommuting, and the employee is really driving things forward. And we have parents that are now doing 16 jobs, where they're homeschooling and they're also working full time, and they're now apparently also parenting on top of this as well. So I'm seeing an increased level of sensitivity, accommodation. I'm seeing a higher sense of allegiance and appreciation for the employee. I'm also seeing a huge support of, if you think this is going to work, go for it. And I think a lot of that just comes from time and building credibility as a change manager within your organization and being really in tune to the pulse. What I'm unfortunately not seeing is that there are some people that are not necessarily on the same page as employers about the necessary precautions that we have to put in place. So not everybody wearing masks, not everybody distancing. So we had to have kind of a come to meeting where it's like, hey, we need you to model these behaviors. And I was really thrilled because I had to pop into the office the other day to return a laptop. And I ran into our CEO and he was wearing a mask, even though he wasn't around anybody. So I was thrilled to see them embracing some of that change and just the support that's coming from the top. Oh, Tyler, thanks for joining. Really happy to see your name. Patrick, is there a cultural credit? Yes. Apparently you have to submit it within 48 hours. Something about your 800 number. Alex, jokes about change. I'm willing to make some lifestyle changes as long as I don't have to do anything differently. Yes, change is so hard. I like being where I am too. John, thank you for the feedback. Thank you for joining. It is often overlooked, but it's coming. The light is shining on change management, and this is the time to start embracing it. My mom, as an HR professional, it's wonderful to hear that companies understanding the importance of addressing both the professional and personal side of employees and their multiple life roles. Caring about employees goes a long way. Yes, and something that we've talked about recently is it's a shame that we're in this situation that so many people are impacted on really incredible different levels, personally, professionally, by this pandemic. But there is a lot of good that's coming from this. One thing that I think specifically is, like you said, that personal and professional side of employees. I think we're going to see a lot of women coming up and out of middle management. I think we're going to see a lot of women being retained in the workplace, but also primary caregivers, so parents specifically, that are now all of a sudden able to do both, because we've proved that you can still be productive and effective in a telecommuting setting, that you don't have to be present in the office every day. And most importantly, that nothing is more important than the health and safety of your friends and family.